Let's get right into it. Game of Thrones Season 3. Let's talk. Alright, Theon. Fuck him. I think that's all I said for Season 2. And Season 3 comes in, and fuck him still. He's getting what he deserves. And then it gets to the point where you're like, you know what? Come on, HBO. Come on with your bullshit. No one's sending in hot babes to go in there just to chop his pecker off. Speaking of which, that's at the point where I was like, ooh, well, he's still a shithead for betraying Robb, but yeah, this is a bit much. He should be dead. I mean, this kind of torture is a bit much. Okay, now, what are we doing with this guy? But then we get to one of the most memorable parts in Game of Thrones in my eyes. Theon Greyjoy's being tortured like a son of a bitch. He escapes, and the people go to hunt him down. And just as they get to him, they're gonna rape him, that's pretty nasty. He's already been tortured a lot, and then this, and it's like, oh man, shit just keeps getting bad for this kid. And then arrows come and stab everybody, and we get a scene that I didn't understand at that time, where the guy goes, oh, you son of a bitch. And I'm like, what was that? And this Ramsey guy rescues Theon, and he takes him back to his sisters. And it really sucked me in, because I'm like, you know what? He's taking him back to his sisters, but there's something wrong here. They're hiding, and I know he said his father and everything, but they're going through these the underground tunnels, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Something is not right. But it felt like it might end up right, you know what I mean? But then they might have problems. I don't know. I felt like there was 50-50 right around there. He was either screwed or he was safe. And then the guy lights the torch and he stands up, and you see that torture device that he's been screwed to, literally. And I was just like, oh, that's fucking epic. That shit was awesome. That was one of the most memorable scenes in my eyes in Game of Thrones. So far up to date. Not the greatest scene, but one of. And I know it's not action-packed. I know it's not, riveting, whatever. No, I thought it was riveting, to be honest with you. But, man, when that reveal came... But then again, I immediately thought, well, listen, and I didn't look into this. I didn't even rewatch it to see what I missed. But I immediately was like, wait a minute. He must have had problems with the guards he lured out. Was that two birds with one stone? Is this guy one clever son of a bitch, that Ramsey, where he frees Theon, and he really enjoys that torture, that Theon is excited he gets to escape, and he's grateful and relieved, and he's escaping, and the guys give chase. And then Ramsey plotted it perfect, where the people who went after Theon are people that Ramsey wants to kill, and then he kills them, and now it makes sense. The guy was like, oh, you son of a bitch, or something like that. And then he brings Theon back, and two birds with one stone. He got so much pleasure out of torturing Theon like that, but in the same strength, he wanted those guys dead. Again, I didn't read the books, and I only watched it once, but that's what I pulled from it right there. And I loved it. As sick and demented and twisted as it is, I absolutely loved it. And I'm a different viewer than I know a lot of viewers I see expressing their opinions on the internet. I love character deaths. I love scenes where it's horrific shit. I'm not talking about like the torture porn. I'm talking about if there's something that's emotionally riveting or gripping, or if it just moves you emotionally. And that's usually when character deaths or huge disappointments, like Theon when he thought he was going to get away, and then that revelation came that he just came all the way, willingly came all the way back around to a place of torture. And if he was just a little bit more paranoid and had a little bit more like, you know what, screw this, I ain't trusting anyone, he could have just got the drop on Ramsey somehow and was out of there. Now, I'm sure he would have got tortured more, and he most likely would have been caught before, but it was worth a shot. But I enjoy those the most, like character deaths, anything that gets your gut all tightened and in a knot. I love it. I fucking love it. It's like a roller coaster for me. Now again, either Ramsey wanted his people dead, or that was just a cheap thrill, you know, for the writers to get a cheap thrill out of the audience. So I'm kind of hoping there was backstory there. And now that I mention this, I should probably look into it. I should have looked into it before I did the review, but I'm sure if one of you guys know, feel free to put that in the comments down below. If Ramsey had problems, if it was obvious, or if that's backstory that we don't find out on the TV show. Because Because I noticed they do that a lot. There's a lot of backstory, I mean a lot, that they don't give us right away or at all. And we just kind of got to figure it out. Alright, now I did mark a note right here. And it was about Season 2, we finally get a question answered. But another question arises. Now, first off, I wrote down, Bruce Bolton told Robb that he's going to send his bastard son, Ramsey, over to Winterfell to get Theon. And they can let everyone else go as long as they get Theon. That was the deal Robb said. And I remember that because one guy said, oh, don't be weak. And he was like, oh, no, I want to kill him myself or something like that. Theon's a dead man, put it that way. But then Theon's crew betrays him and they give Theon to the Boltons, okay? But listen, we didn't find this out in Season 2. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But this was a mystery in Season 2. Who burned Winterfell down? Because it wasn't the Ironclads, is that what they're called? Because they betrayed Theon and got the hell out of there. They stabbed the old guy, and that's going to become important because that is a big what the fuck. So they stabbed the old guy, they give Theon to the Bolton crew. Here's the thing. Did the Bolton crew let them go? Because as we see later on, they use Theon to betray this other group of Ironclads, and they end up killing them. So did they really let Theon's other crew go? Or did they kill him? But this is where we get the reveal. It's Ramsey and the Boltons who burn Winterfell down and blame it on the Ironclad and Theon, And that brings me to my point. Wouldn't they kill Theon's crew, even though Robb Stark gave them permission to leave as long as they gave up Theon or something like that? Wouldn't they kill them so they didn't tell anybody else? What if the Ironclad people got back to their place of residence and were like, listen, we did not burn down Winterfell, so I don't know what kind of shit that is. Wouldn't somebody find out and take it to Robb Stark and be like, hey, somebody burned down Winterfell and it wasn't the Ironclads, so it might have been the Boltons, because, they were the last ones to kind of leave. But forget that. That's a small little question. The biggest question of all, if the Ironclads stabbed that old man who was helping out Bran, how in the magical unicorn fuck did he end up outside of Winterfell by a tree, dying somewhat peacefully? As peacefully as you can die with a knife wound to the gut. How does that happen? Because, keep in mind, he got stabbed right there in the center of that area, and you have the Boltons surrounding the frickin' place. You have the Ironclads knocking Theon out, taking them outside. Whether or not they all die and Theon gets captured, that's up for debate. But now this old guy somehow makes it past everybody as they come in and kill everyone else who's around and burn Winterfell to the ground. How did that old guy go from being right there, smack dab in the center middle of everything, to being out by the tree dying peacefully? How the hell did that happen? Now, the only thing I can think of is because they needed the old man alive somehow, so they miraculously moved him as kind of like a plot hole, just so he can give some exposition to Bran and crew. That's the only reason I see that he somehow made it from here to there. If anyone else knows, leave that in the comment box. And speaking of Bran, yeah, that little bastard's a guessing game. I mean, I get it. I understand. There's something that's calling him and he has to go to it. Yeah, I get it. It's clever. He picks up the dragon glass from what's his name on the way. Yeah, I get all that. It's just it's just not interesting in my eyes, at all. I tell you what though, I will say this. Although it is a part of the story that I am absolutely the least interested in, they do it in a way where sometimes the majority of the time, I really don't mind if it's on the screen for a few minutes. So I will give them some credit for that. It wasn't overwhelmingly, boring. But it's the least interesting story that's going on in my eyes. And I know, guys, listen, if Bran turns out to be, a friggin' magical wizard later on, and he just rules the fucking 7 kingdoms and all this other crazy shit. Yeah, that's all good. I see that, because I got a lot of people from the book who say, oh, if it's boring now, just wait, there's a purpose. Yes, there's always a purpose. That's how stories go. That's kind of the point of why you have a setup so you can have a payoff later. It's just not something that interests me, I'll be honest with you. And there is clever writing there. Listen, if you like the magic, and it's probably the magic that's throwing me off, I'm not a huge fan of younger actors. You notice a lot of weak spots with the younger actors, so I'm a little biased in this department, but I will tell you, there is some clever writing. You know what I'm saying? Taking a kid and early on paralyzing him and using that disability to advance the story, 3 seasons later? And I know it's a book, so it's probably like 3 books later, or 2 books into it. That's pretty clever because you have this boy early on, you gave him a disability. That disability puts him in a position where he can't do something. So he's able to, out of desperation, out of frustration, he's able to go inside a big man's mind and take over his mind to get him to stop yelling, to give away their position. That is clever writing. I get that. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to knock that. And I do want to make that very clear. When I say this doesn't really interest me as the story, I'm not saying this is bad writing. So don't confuse the two. I'm just saying, me personally, my personal tastes and interests, it's just not there for me. But it might pick up, And I might be the only one, too. If there's anyone else out there who just doesn't really click with the Bran story, please let me know in the comment box. Now, since we're on the topic of the Starks, let's talk about Arya Stark. Is that her name? Did I pronounce that right? I was all confident. Watch I pronounce that wrong. It's called Arya Yar Stark. Next, Arya Stark.